Don't stop. Don't ever stop. £8,000. Quite a lot of money, this. Enough cash to buy yourself, I don't know, the wing mirror on a Bentley Flying Spur, maybe a wheel or a radio. But for the same $7,995, you could buy yourself an entire brand new Dacia Sandero. So what do you get for your not much money? Well, you get a Dacia, and Dacias are basically a Romanian brand which are owned by Renault. Underneath, this is a Renault Clio, so it's not some cheap knockoff. Okay, it's cheap, but it's actually quite reputable. And I do like some of the design choices that they've gone with here. I love this power bulge on the bonnet, which kind of hints at the monster that lies underneath. I love these LED DRLs, very distinctive, very premium looking. And speaking of premium, look at that. Chrome inserts on the grille, just like you get on a Bentley Flying Spur. Plus, they're both plastic, so just like a Bentley, in fact. I like these little alloy wheels you got going on here, although they're not actually alloy wheels, they're hubcaps designed to look like alloys. And the upshot is that if you stand back, you can't tell. And if you curb them, you won't care. Keyless entry, allow me to demonstrate the amount of room you get inside. Doors open nice and wide. Good leg room, good headroom, confirmed. And the boot is a massive 328 litres, loads of room in there for all your shopping, hooks and tie-down points galore, plus this fetching little man bag which matches the paint and my eyes. Now I know what you're thinking, inside is going to be a bit cheap and nasty, and I will show you what you get, but first let me show you what you don't get.
You don't get endless luxuries like fancy wood on the dash. You don't get a rotating screen or tablets on the rear seats, or an accessories pack that alone costs £37,000, or a fridge for keeping your champagne cool. In fact, you don't get a lot.
In the Sandero, you just get the basics. The entry-level car comes with power steering, electronic stability program, power windows at the front, everything you need from a car. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of plastic in here, but they have tried to cover that up with some very clever cloth material. You get a couple of USB ports, some chrome effect trim around the steering wheel, an armrest. There's decent amounts of storage space, couple of cup holders, good cubby storage, and even a little hook to put your man bag. Plus any extras that you actually want, because you've saved so much money, you can add those at a later date.
The rear seat entertainment in the Flying Spur costs a ridiculous amount of cash, but why not buy your own entertainment for far less? Are you that desperate for a champagne fridge that you'd pay a couple of grand for it? Of course not. Not when you could buy your own cooling solution for next to nothing. And with the money you save, your upgrades are limited only by your imagination. Coffee machines, televisions, microwaves.
Okay, so the ambiance might not be as nice as it is in a more expensive car, but who needs massaging seats when you can have an actual massage?
In all seriousness, there are 3 equipment levels: Access, Essential and Comfort. Essential gives you the essentials: power steering, airbags and a 65 horsepower engine. It doesn't include body-colored bumpers or hubcaps or a radio, but throw money at it and you can have some official treats.
If you can spare an extra £2,000, well then you can get the Essentials package, which does include body-colored bumpers and those fake alloys and a whole host of luxuries like a radio, DAB no less, a USB port, the option of a 90 horsepower engine and cruise control and this funky little mobile phone holder for your smartphone. If you're feeling really flush and you can spare $11,995, well then you can go for the Comfort Pack, which gives you the option of a 100 horsepower engine and this bad boy, a big old touchscreen infotainment system with a built-in navigation system and wireless Apple CarPlay. Wireless! You just don't get that in cars this cheap. Plus, look at it, it works really well, it's responsive, and the build quality isn't bad either. That is at least on par with a Volkswagen. It just doesn't feel cheap.
Obviously, in performance cars like the Flying Spur, the engine is a huge part of what you're paying for. 600 plus horsepower doesn't come cheap, but it does allow for impressive acceleration on demand. 0 to 62 in 3.8 seconds, and well over 200 miles an hour. Stats you just don't get in a cheaper car.
The Sandero doesn't go quite as fast as a Bentley, but I'm in the 90 horsepower version right now, and there's enough grunt in there, certainly to overtake and to get yourself out of trouble should you find yourself in it. And the engine, I wouldn't call it melodic. It sounds a bit like a hairdryer, if I'm being honest, but foot flat to the floor. How fast am I going? 28 miles an hour. Perfectly safe, but feels quite exciting. I like that in a car. And then when you get to a corner, it handles surprisingly well. There is a little bit of understeer. Let's turn it in. Yeah, that runs wide, but you can feel the stability control actually reeling you in, correcting your line. That was vaguely terrifying. But look at me, I'm alive. You could call this a bit of a driver's car, and I say that because it's got this lovely 6-speed manual gearbox with quite a nice action, actually. It reminds me of a first-generation Audi R8, you know, with a gated box. It feels really nice. The steering is actually pretty good as well. It's quite responsive. It's not the fastest rack in the world, which means that you do have to pile in quite a lot of lock before it does anything. But when it does, it works quite well, and you do get a fair amount of feedback from it. Plus, if you're ever feeling a bit naughty, look down here. Manual handbrake, proper old school. This car will allow you to get a little bit naughty if that's what you're into.
Handling technology like 48-volt roll stabilization and rear wheel steering are an essential part of the Bentley's arsenal, as is the expensive, fancy dual-clutch gearbox. Big, heavy cars need all the help they can get to stay on the straight and narrow. These systems work well, but they also add massive cost. The Sandero has a more stripped-back feel.
When you're driving the Sandero in a more sedate, chilled out kind of way, that's where it really shines. The suspension is really well judged. It's not the most complex or innovative suspension system in the world, but it just does the job. The Sandero is really light as well. In something like the Bentley, which feels heavy, you do feel that mass, but this just kind of skips over the ground like a gazelle. Is it perfect? No, it's far from perfect. I mean, going from a Bentley to this, you do feel where that extra money is being spent, and a lot of it is being spent on refinement, whereas the Bentley is eerily quiet and smooth. This maybe lacks a little bit of that. You can definitely hear the road noise and the wind noise, but you know what? Big whoop. Buy yourself some noise cancelling headphones with the money you save. Sort it out. The brakes, I guess you could moan about those. They use drum brakes at the back, but honestly, it stops perfectly fine. I never ever felt for a moment in this car that it needed more stopping power. It just works. The last thing you might possibly want to moan about is the fact that the seats are a little bit on the firm side, but do you know what? Buy a cushion.
If you're unsure about the Sandero styling and you want something a little more lifestyle, then you might want to consider the Sandero Stepway, a version of the Sandero that's designed to look a little bit more like an SUV. It isn't an SUV, of course, because it's basically identical to the hatch, but it does have a slightly higher ride height, roof rails you can chuck a roof box on, and some plastic cladding on the wheel arches so you can pretend it's okay to crash into things. It's just as practical as the Sandero, but gives you a slightly better view of the road and maybe slightly more credibility in the supermarket car park. Think of it as the cheap alternative to the Bentley Bentayga.
The Stepway is genuinely good as well. If I was being hypercritical, I would say that I would have preferred a bit more practicality to match the looks, and it also doesn't have the option of all-wheel drive, but when am I ever off-road? Those are features I just don't need. Okay, I want to give you a verdict now. Is it worth buying the Sandero or the Stepway? Well, yeah, 100%. Are they a false economy? Absolutely not. They are brilliant cars that show exactly what can be done on a budget without cutting too many corners. Should appeal to everyone, whether you're young or old. Massage, please. Whether you're new or experienced, and actually, whether you're rich or poor. Beverage. It just goes to show that you don't actually have to spend a lot of cash to get a lot of car. Don't stop. Don't ever stop.